My mom kicked me out for my sister. A year later, she stood at my door with a suitcase and empty eyes. You wouldn't believe what her sister did to her, the one she betrayed me for. Subscribe so you don't miss the sequel. Write in the comments what country you're from. I read every one. I never really questioned it as a child. The way love moved in our house, quiet and one-directional, like water flowing downhill, always toward Anna. She was the baby, the sensitive one, the golden girl. That was the word my mother used, sensitive, though I learned early that it meant a great many things. It meant Anna didn't have to clean the kitchen after dinner because the sponge hurt her hands. It meant she got new clothes every school year while I wore secondhand jeans with someone else's name written inside. It meant that when I tried to speak up, my mother would look at me with a tight, tired face and say, "You're the strong one. Let her have this." Once, when I was 10 and Anna was 7, she broke a porcelain vase in the living room. I remember hearing the crash and running in, only to find her staring down at the shards like they'd fallen from the sky. Mom came in behind me, assessed the scene, and then turned on me so fast I felt the sting of her slap before I even registered what she was saying. "You were supposed to watch her." That was my first lesson in what it meant to be the strong one. You were the one to blame, even when you weren't there. But I wanted her approval. More than that, I wanted to be seen. So I tried. I helped in the kitchen, kept my grades perfect, never asked for much. When I brought home a spelling bee trophy, Mom said, "That's nice," and then turned to Anna to ask how her ballet class went. That was always the pattern. Whatever I did, however good, it never shone quite as brightly as whatever Anna needed in that moment. It wasn't that Anna was cruel. Not then. She was clever, charming when she wanted to be, and quick to cry if things didn't go her way. I didn't realize until much later how deliberate those tears were. At 12, she once took a necklace of mine and lost it. When I confronted her, she ran to Mom sobbing, saying I'd yelled at her. I got grounded for a week. Later, when I told Anna I knew she'd lied, she smiled and said, "You always forgive me. That's your thing." High school passed in a blur of part-time jobs and applications. I earned a scholarship to a university out of state. I left home at 18 and never looked back. Not because I wanted to run away, but because there was nothing left to stay for. Anna stayed behind. She dabbled in modeling for a while, then moved on to nail tech classes, then spiritual wellness coaching. Every few months, a new obsession. She always quit halfway through, always had an excuse. Mom kept her afloat, paid her rent, covered car repairs, once even bailed her out of a payday loan. When I called home to ask how things were, Mom would talk about Anna's potential and how I shouldn't judge. "Not everyone's as driven as you," she'd say, as if ambition were a character flaw. I never asked for anything. I paid my own way, worked 2 jobs through college, bought my first car in cash, and I didn't resent that. Or at least, I told myself I didn't. I figured that was the deal. I was the strong one, she was the one who needed help. I was practical, she was soft. I didn't need anyone, she couldn't function without being loved. But things began to shift about a year after I moved back to the state. I was living in a small apartment, working full-time in HR, saving for a down payment. I saw Mom on holidays, sent money when she had car trouble. We weren't close, but we spoke. And one weekend, I came by her house and noticed something off. The paint was fresh, the front steps had been redone. Inside, there was a new couch, new curtains, even the kitchen had updated appliances. I raised an eyebrow. "Did you win the lottery and forget to tell me?" I joked. Mom laughed nervously. "Oh, just small upgrades. A home equity loan." "On the house?" I asked. She nodded, brushing it off. Anna needed a little help. I didn't press. But I left with a heaviness I couldn't shake. Something didn't feel right. A few weeks later, I found out more than I wanted to. A friend who worked at the bank mentioned in passing that my mother had taken out a significant second mortgage, over $40,000. I confronted Mom, gently, hoping it was a misunderstanding. She looked me straight in the eye and said, Anna needed a medical procedure for her confidence, something personal. I can't explain it to you. She got plastic surgery? I asked. It's not that simple, Mom snapped. Don't make it sound petty. It's for her self-esteem. You wouldn't understand. Maybe she was right. Maybe I didn't understand. Because at that moment I felt something harden in my chest. Not anger, exactly. Not even jealousy. Just a realization. There would never be a version of this family where I came first. Not even second. I didn't exist in that hierarchy. Not in a meaningful way. Still, I didn't walk away. I told myself I was above it. I let her be. I let them both be. What else could I do? I had my own life, a quiet, self-contained one. I thought distance would protect me. I thought maturity would make it hurt less. I thought that if I kept my head down, I could get through life without reopening old wounds. But old wounds don't close when you pretend they're not there. They just wait. And they bleed when you least expect it. The call came on a Thursday morning. Anna was getting married. Mom called me herself, more enthusiastic than I'd heard her in years. You'll come, of course, she said, like there had never been any question. Of course, I said. She didn't ask if I was seeing anyone. Didn't ask how work was. Just launched into the venue, the guest list, the dress fittings. She'd already put down deposits, already chosen the cake. I listened, nodded, made the right noises. But something inside me felt unsteady. You're happy for her? Mom asked, a little too sharply. Yes, I said. It was a lie, but not the kind you say with malice. Just the kind you say to keep the peace. When I hung up, I stared at the wall for a long time. I knew even then that something was coming. I just didn't know what. The weeks that followed felt like watching a slow-motion train you couldn't stop. Every time I spoke with Mom, there was a new development. Anna had found her dress. It was custom, of course, flown in from some boutique designer in New York. They'd booked a venue at an exclusive estate just outside the city with a view over the hills and a pond out back where swans supposedly nested. There would be a live quartet, a private chef, handcrafted invitations written in gold ink. I listened in silence as she detailed each extravagance, and with each phone call, I felt myself shrinking farther and farther away from the people I used to call family. I asked once, gently, how they were affording it. Mom gave a vague answer about Anna's fiancé being well-connected and how they were combining resources. I didn't believe her, not fully. I knew Anna. I knew her fiancé, or at least the type he was. Slick, toothy smile, a little too charming, the kind of man who made sure everyone heard him when he walked into a room. I'd met him only once, briefly, at Mom's house. He'd shaken my hand like he was closing a deal and told me I seemed like the sensible sister. I didn't like him, but that had become a familiar feeling. I didn't like most of the people Anna surrounded herself with. The invitation to the wedding arrived 2 weeks later in a heavy white envelope with embossed calligraphy. My name was spelled correctly, but the address was from 3 apartments ago. That told me everything. I wasn't on the list. I was added out of obligation. I wasn't part of the celebration. I was a seat to be filled. I RSVP'd without comment. No +1. When I arrived at the estate on the day of the rehearsal dinner, I realized I had underestimated just how far they'd gone. The entrance was lined with lanterns and fresh flowers. Staff in black vests and white gloves greeted guests as they arrived. A golf cart carried me and a few others up a winding path to the main house, which looked more like a museum than a venue. Inside, the walls were hung with gauzy fabric and fairy lights. Tables were set with crystal, silverware heavy enough to double as weapons, and name cards written in calligraphy that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Anna didn't see me at first. She was flitting from group to group, laughing too loudly, her hands always in motion. When she finally spotted me, her face lit up in that way I remembered from childhood, too wide, too rehearsed. "You made it," she said, hugging me with arms that barely touched my back. "You look so professional." That was Anna's way of saying I looked boring. "You look beautiful," I said, and meant it. She did. Her hair was swept into some intricate braid, her makeup flawless. She looked like a woman from a bridal magazine. A woman I'd never met. She launched into a monologue about the schedule, the photographer, the seating chart. I listened politely, my eyes scanning the room. Mom was at the far end, deep in conversation with a man in a tailored suit. She looked tired beneath the makeup, and her smile seemed strained. I made my way over when Anna was pulled aside by one of the planners. "Hi," I said. Mom turned, blinking like she hadn't expected me to be there. "Oh, you made it." It stung more than I wanted it to. "Of course." She nodded, looked past me. "They're doing the flower arrangement run-through soon. You should find your table." I didn't answer. I watched her talk to the man again, her voice lowered, one hand fluttering to her chest. Something about the interaction felt off, but I couldn't place it. The next day was the wedding. It was, objectively, beautiful. The sky was clear, the air warm but not hot. The ceremony was held under a floral arch overlooking the pond. Guests arrived in dresses that shimmered and suits that probably cost more than my car. Anna walked down the aisle to a live string quartet, her train held aloft by two flower girls, her veil catching the sunlight like a halo. I sat near the back, not in the last row but close enough. No one spoke to me except a waiter who offered champagne. I watched Mom sit proudly in the front row, dabbing her eyes as if this moment had justified every sacrifice she'd ever made. The reception was held in a grand tent strung with chandeliers. Waitstaff moved silently between tables, pouring wine, presenting plated dinners like artwork. I ate without tasting anything. I smiled when expected. I toasted with water. The speeches began halfway through dinner. The maid of honor spoke first, then the best man. Finally, the groom stood. He was already a little drunk, red-cheeked and animated. He tapped his glass and smiled his too white smile. "I just want to take a moment," he said, "to thank the woman who made this all possible." The room hushed. He turned toward Mom, who looked startled, then pleased. "She has been more than generous," he continued. "And thanks to her, we were able to start our life together without the burden of debt. The house, the support, the wedding, none of it would have been possible without her." People clapped. Some even stood. I felt the floor tilt under me. "The house? What house?" He lifted his glass in a toast. "To the most selfless mother-in-law in the world." Applause, laughter, cameras flashed. I stared at Mom. She smiled, nodded graciously, but her hands trembled in her lap. I watched Anna lean in, kiss her cheek, say something I couldn't hear. After dinner, I slipped out the side of the tent. I needed air. I stood near the back of the estate, beside a hedge that smelled like citrus. My head buzzed. I heard voices nearby, laughter, a low chuckle. "Man, I didn't think she'd go through with it," someone said, a male voice. Another voice answered, unmistakably the groom's. "She signed everything. Hell, she even insisted, said it was her wedding gift. House is in our name now. She doesn't even have a copy of the deed." Laughter again. "Damn, cold. Hey, she's old. What does she need a house for?" I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I stood there until the voices faded. Later that night, I confronted Mom. She was sitting alone in the bridal suite, her makeup smudged, shoes off. "Did you give them the house?" I asked. She looked up, startled. "What?" "The house," I repeated. "Is it in their name now?" She hesitated. Then, quietly, "Yes." I stared at her. Why? They're starting their life together, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. They needed a foundation. I wanted to give them a future. And what about your future? She looked at me like I was speaking a foreign language. I don't need anything. I wanted to scream. Instead, I said, You gave them everything, and they're laughing about it behind your back. She flinched. What do you mean? I heard him. I heard what he said. He doesn't respect you, he played you. Her face closed off. You don't understand. You never had a family of your own. You don't know what it's like to want your child to be safe. I was your child, I said. But I guess I was too safe to care about. That night, I packed my things and left before the cake was even cut. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't look back. The wedding was perfect. It was everything Anna ever wanted. And it broke something in me I hadn't realized was still whole. I didn't sleep the night I left the wedding. I drove for hours with no destination, just the hum of the highway and the furious rush of thoughts crashing into each other in my head. At some point, I pulled into a rest stop, sat in my car with the engine off, and stared at the orange glow of a street lamp until the sky began to pale. Then, I drove home, made coffee, and stood in my kitchen, still in the dress I'd worn the night before, shoes in my hand, wondering how everything had unfolded exactly the way I always knew it would, and still hurt more than I could have imagined. In the days that followed, I avoided every call. Mom tried twice. Anna didn't try at all. I didn't answer. I didn't want to hear the justifications, the rationalizations, the same old phrases I could already predict word for word. I didn't want to be told once again that I was too serious, too cold, or my least favorite, too strong for my own good. I didn't want to sit through another conversation where I was asked to understand, but never understood. Instead, I went to work. I smiled at the front desk receptionist. I sent emails. I hit deadlines. I took long walks after dinner, listened to music I didn't really hear, and let the days pass like pages turned by someone else. In the quiet moments, though, I saw them. Anna in her white dress, Mom with that trembling smile, the groom's smug face as he toasted the woman who gave away her life for a daughter who would forget it by morning. I found myself remembering things I hadn't thought about in years, like how, when I was 11, I stayed home sick with the flu and begged Mom to stay with me, just for one day. She gave me crackers and left for work, reminding me that Anna had a recital that evening and they couldn't miss it. Or the time I had to go to my high school scholarship interview alone because Anna had totaled her car and Mom had to meet with insurance agents. And then there was the day I graduated college, walking across the stage, scanning the crowd for her face and not finding it. Later, she told me the flight was too expensive, and Anna had been having a difficult time emotionally that week. She never came to my apartment, never saw where I lived, how I made a life for myself without asking for anything, and I had never asked, not once. I wore that restraint like armor for years. Now it felt like a weight I didn't ask for. I think I was still holding on to something. Not hope exactly, but the outline of it. The idea that one day she might see me, not just as the responsible one, the dependable one, but as a person, someone worthy of pride, of attention, of love, not measured against Anna's need. That hope dissolved the night she confirmed it was all true, that she had given them everything, not just the house, but the years she could have spent securing her own future, the money she could have used for her health, her independence, the effort she never spent on me. It was one thing to suspect it. It was another to hear her say it so plainly. You don't need anything. As if needing nothing were a virtue I'd been born with, as if strength were a curse I chose. A week after the wedding, I returned to the house. Not to reconcile, only to retrieve the last of what belonged to me, A few boxes of books, an old winter coat, some photo albums I didn't even want but couldn't stomach the thought of Anna touching. Mom wasn't home when I arrived. The lock had been changed. I knocked, waited. No one came. I sat in the car and called her. This time, she answered. "I didn't know you were coming," she said, her voice thin. "I texted you 2 days ago." A pause. "I didn't see it. I need to get my things." "I'm not there," she said. "Anna's home. She has a key." "I'm not asking her." Another silence. She sighed. "I'll be back in an hour." She arrived in 45 minutes, flustered, her lipstick uneven. She hugged me automatically. I didn't hug her back. Inside, the house looked different. Not just the new furniture, but the energy. It no longer felt like home, not even a place that once had been. It felt like a hotel, where someone had carefully arranged their things to suggest a life that had never really existed. My old bedroom had been converted into a guest room with stiff white bedding and no trace of me. My boxes were in the garage. I didn't ask who'd moved them. I packed in silence. She hovered. "I know you're upset," she said finally. I didn't respond. I did what I thought was right. I looked at her then. "You gave them your house." "It's just a house." "It's all you had." "Have you?" I let out a breath that felt like it had been trapped in my lungs for years. "You've never had me." Her face fell. "That's not fair." I closed a box. "Neither is this." She didn't speak again. I loaded the car, one box at a time. When I finished, I stood in the driveway and looked at her. Her shoulders were slumped. She looked smaller than I remembered. "I left something for you," I said. In the top drawer of the hutch, a folder. Her brows pulled together. "What is it?" "Proof," I said. "Of what you gave up. Of how they see you." She didn't ask what I meant. Maybe she already knew. Maybe that was why she didn't go inside right away. I drove away and didn't look in the mirror. The weeks that followed were quiet. She didn't call. I didn't reach out. I tried to fill the silence with routine. I worked, I read, I walked. I started therapy, almost on a whim. The woman I saw had kind eyes and a calm voice. She listened without interruption as I explained haltingly how I felt like I had been erased. "Have you told your mother that?" she asked. Filling him in. He wouldn't hear it. Feeling inferior. That's not what I asked. I didn't answer, because I didn't know if I could say it out loud, if saying it would undo me. I told her about the wedding, the house, the way Mom had looked at me when I told her she never had me. "Do you regret saying it?" she asked. "No," I said, and that was the truth. I regret that it was true. I thought about forgiveness, about what it meant, whether it was an act, a decision, or just a thing you let happen when the weight of anger finally exhausts you. But I wasn't tired of being angry. Not yet. Anger was the only thing that had protected me for years. One night, I took out the old photo albums. I hadn't planned to, but they were sitting by the bookshelf, still in the box from the garage. I opened the first one and flipped through the pages slowly. There I was at 5, holding Anna as a baby. Me at 10, grinning with missing teeth holding a soccer trophy. Me at 17, standing in my cap and gown. Mom's arm loosely around my shoulder. But her eyes, even in that photo, were searching for something out of frame. I closed the album. The next morning, I got an email from a cousin I hadn't spoken to in years. Just one line. "Is it true Anna and Dylan kicked your mom out of the house?" I stared at the screen, heart pounding. There was a phone number, a short message. "Call me." I didn't. Instead, I picked up my phone and called someone else. Mom answered on the third ring. Her voice was barely a whisper when she answered. It was late, too late for politeness, and I half expected her to ignore the call, but she picked up. Not with her usual clipped tone, not the voice I'd grown up with, full of command and exhaustion. This voice was thinner, as if pulled through wire. "Hello?" "It's me," I said. A pause. "Lurs, I was going to call you," she said, then quickly. "I didn't want to bother you." "What happened?" I asked, already knowing, already feeling the shape of it in my chest like a familiar ache. Another pause. They asked me to leave." "Just like that?" "It wasn't sudden," she said, though the tremor in her voice betrayed her. They'd been talking about needing more space, about how hard it was to live all together. "Ainley told you to go." He said it wasn't personal. I sat down slowly, phone to my ear. "Where are you now?" "And outside. I packed some things. I thought I'd stay with a friend, but she's out of town. I didn't know who else to—" "Text me the address," I said. "I'm coming." It took 40 minutes to reach her. I drove mostly in silence, hands tight on the steering wheel, eyes flicking to the clock too often. It was past 11. The road out toward the house was dark, emptier than I remembered. When I pulled into the long, curved drive, I saw her immediately, sitting on the edge of the low stone wall near the gate, a suitcase beside her. She looked smaller than I'd ever seen her, wrapped in a worn coat I recognized from a decade ago. Her hair was tied back messily, and she was staring at nothing, just the space in front of her, as though trying to convince herself she was still inside. I got out of the car, left the engine running. She didn't stand. "You came," she said. "Of course I did." She reached for the handle of her suitcase, but I stepped forward and took it from her. It was heavier than I expected. "No one helped you carry this?" "No one was home," she said. "They were out." "Did they know you were leaving?" "They left a note," she said it would be better if we all had space." I didn't speak. I helped her into the car, settled the suitcase in the back, and pulled away from the house that once belonged to her. Neither of us looked back. She didn't speak much on the drive. She stared out the window, hands folded in her lap. Once or twice she opened her mouth like she meant to say something, but no words came. I didn't press. I let her sit in the silence she'd never allowed me when I was younger, and I found that I wasn't angry in that moment, just tired. When we reached my apartment, I showed her to the guest room, offered her a glass of water, a blanket. She moved like someone walking through water, slow and uncertain. She sat on the edge of the bed, and I stood in the doorway, watching her with a strange sense of detachment. This was the same woman who had once told me, without blinking, that I didn't need anything. Now she had nothing, and she had come to me. "I'll let you rest," I said. "Bathroom's down the hall." She nodded. "Thank you." I closed the door behind me and stood there a moment, listening to the stillness. Then I went to the kitchen, made tea, and sat at the table, staring at the steam until it vanished. In the morning, she was up early, sitting at the table with her hands wrapped around a mug of coffee she hadn't touched. Her eyes were swollen, but she didn't look like she had cried. She looked like she'd forgotten how. "I can look for somewhere else," she said. "You can stay here," I replied. "For now." She nodded, then said, "You don't have to do this." "I know." Another silence, then softly, "I'm sorry." I didn't answer. "I should have seen it," she said. "I should have listened. You tried to tell me. You didn't want to hear it. I thought—" Her voice broke and she cleared her throat. I thought if I just gave enough, they'd love me back." "They never loved you," I said. "They used you." She looked up at me then, and for the first time in my life, I saw it. Regret. Not the performative kind, not the dismissive hand wave, but something real. something that lived in her eyes. "I was a fool," she whispered. "You were a mother who thought sacrifice would earn you love," I said. "But it doesn't work that way. I gave them everything." "Yes, and they took it." She shook her head slowly. "And I never gave you anything." We sat in silence. It wasn't awkward. It was raw. It was a silence we both knew too well. But this time it was full of something new. Not forgiveness, not yet, but understanding maybe. A beginning. Later that afternoon, she unpacked some of her things, hung her coat on a hook by the door. She moved carefully, as though unsure if she had permission to exist in this space. I let her. I didn't offer her comfort I couldn't give, and she didn't ask for more than I offered. Over the next few days, she began to help in small ways. Dishes, folding laundry, watering the plant I always forgot. She asked before touching anything. She walked with a quietness that bordered on apology. One night, she cooked dinner. Simple pasta, garlic bread, a salad. She didn't ask if I wanted her to, she just did it. When I came home and smelled the food, I hesitated in the doorway. "Hope you don't mind," she said. I sat down at the table, picked up a fork, and took a bite. "It's good," I said. She smiled, a small, tentative thing. "I used to make that when you were little." I nodded. "I remember." We didn't talk about Anna. Not for a long time. It felt like a wound still bleeding, but I knew she was thinking about her, and I knew what she must be feeling. Shame. Loss. Maybe even betrayal. But I wasn't going to reach for her through that pain. She would have to cross that bridge alone. Eventually, she told me the whole story. How they had convinced her to transfer the deed, how she'd signed the papers without reading them fully, trusting Dylan's notary, how Anna had insisted it was just a formality, how she had woken up one morning to find her name no longer on anything. "They said I was in the way," she told me one evening, her voice quiet, "that they needed space for the baby." I blinked. "Baby?" "She's pregnant," she said, 6 weeks. The news landed strangely. I felt no surprise, no jealousy, no pity, only a dull awareness that the cycle was already repeating. "They'll do to that child what they did to you," I said. She nodded. "I think so." I watched her for a moment. "And you?" "I won't be part of it." That night, I found her sitting on the couch, a blanket around her shoulders. She looked older than I'd ever seen her, not in the way of age, but in the way of someone who had finally stopped pretending. "I don't expect you to forgive me," she said. "I don't even know if I deserve it." I sat down beside her. "It's not about deserving. Then what is it? It's about stopping the damage." She turned her head slowly. "You did." I nodded. "Yes, I did." We sat there, mother and daughter, not trying to fix each other, just breathing in the same space. Maybe one day I would forgive her, maybe not, but I knew I wouldn't hurt myself for her anymore. I wouldn't keep swallowing silence just to keep her comfortable. That chapter was closed. She had come to me empty-handed, and I had given her shelter, not because she earned it, not because she asked, but because I could. And that, more than anything, was the difference between us. That night, I stood in the kitchen, watching the rain trace lines down the window. In the other room, she was humming quietly, folding a towel. For the first time in my life, she was small, and I was not. Sometimes, silence isn't weakness. Sometimes, silence is the boundary you set to finally be free. If you don't want to miss the next story, make sure to subscribe. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. And if you're still watching, there's more waiting for you. Check out the next one.